Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into a story that's equal parts infuriating and heartbreaking, a tale of betrayal, lies, and the ultimate test of trust. On the surface, Nathan and Claire's marriage seemed picture perfect, but behind closed doors, it was a ticking time bomb. Claire's dangerous affair with her charming boss, Oliver, and Nathan's questionable connection with his bold coworker, Emma, spark a chain of events that will leave you speechless. Add in a shocking betrayal from a trusted friend, and this story has everything to keep you on the edge of your seat. Stick around as we unravel this emotional roller coaster and uncover the fiery consequences of choices that changed everything. If you love gripping stories like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Now, let's dive in. It was the summer of 2019, a year that seemed simpler in hindsight. The setting was a quiet, picturesque suburb just outside of Chicago, a place where lawns were perfectly manicured, mailboxes stood at attention, and everyone waved at their neighbors as they drove by. It was the kind of neighborhood where people prided themselves on appearances, even when those appearances hid secrets that no one dared to talk about. At the heart of this idyllic community lived Claire and Nathan. To anyone looking in from the outside, they were the perfect couple. Claire, a 34-year-old marketing executive, had a charm that could light up any room. She was the kind of person who could make small talk sound like an art form, always leaving people with a smile and a sense that they had been truly heard. Nathan, 37, was an architect with a quiet intensity, the kind of guy who preferred blueprints to people but would do anything for Claire. Together, they seemed untouchable. A modern-day power couple whose lives appeared to be as seamless as the designs in Nathan's portfolio. But perfection, as they say, is often an illusion. The story begins on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Claire was in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured her coffee. The scent of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the faint aroma of lavender from the candle she'd lit. Her way of starting each day on a calm note. Nathan was at the dining table, his laptop open, already immersed in the world of design. Their golden retriever, Bailey, lay curled at his feet, occasionally thumping his tail in a rhythmic beat against the floor. "Busy day ahead?" Claire asked, sliding a plate of toast and scrambled eggs toward Nathan. She always made breakfast, a small act of care that had become their routine over the years. Nathan looked up, his blue eyes softening as he smiled. "The Henderson project's deadline is coming up, so I'll probably be working late at the office tonight. Don't wait up." Claire nodded, though a flicker of disappointment crossed her face. Late nights had become more frequent lately, and while she knew Nathan's work was demanding, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She brushed the thought aside, chalking it up to her own insecurities. "You?" Nathan asked, taking a sip of his coffee. "Meeting with a new client," Claire replied, leaning against the counter. "Big project, lots of pressure, but I'm excited." Nathan nodded approvingly. "You'll crush it." And just like that, their conversation drifted back into the comfortable rhythm of their morning routine. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Small, almost imperceptible at first, but there, nonetheless. Later that day, Claire arrived at the downtown office of her newest client, Oliver Hayes. He was the CEO of a rapidly growing tech startup, the kind of man who radiated confidence and had an aura that could command a room. Claire noticed him immediately as she stepped into the sleek, glass-walled conference room. Oliver was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and had a smile that hinted at mischief. "Claire," he said warmly, extending a hand. "It's great to finally meet you. I've heard nothing but good things." "The pleasure's mine," Claire replied, her professional demeanor intact. Though she couldn't ignore the subtle energy in the room, Oliver's presence was magnetic, and as they discussed the details of the campaign, she found herself captivated, not just by his vision for the project, but by him. By the time the meeting ended, Claire felt an odd mixture of exhilaration and guilt. She told herself it was harmless, that admiring someone's charisma was normal, but as she drove home that evening, her thoughts lingered on Oliver longer than they should have. Meanwhile, Nathan was at his office, or at least that's what Claire believed. In reality, he was sitting in a dimly lit bar across town, nursing a whiskey and staring blankly at his phone. Beside him sat Emma, a colleague from his firm. Emma was everything Claire wasn't: spontaneous, edgy, and unapologetically bold. Her laugh was loud, her hair streaked with blue, and she had a way of making Nathan forget the weight of his responsibilities. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders," Emma said, nudging his arm playfully. Nathan smiled weakly. "Just work stuff." Emma leaned closer, her eyes locking onto his. "Well, if you ever need to talk about it, I'm here." For a moment, Nathan considered opening up. The truth was, he had been feeling disconnected from Claire lately. Their lives had become a series of routines, and while he loved her, he couldn't deny the growing distance between them. But instead of voicing these thoughts, he downed the rest of his drink and changed the subject. "Another round?" he asked, signaling to the bartender. Over the next few weeks, both Claire and Nathan began noticing changes in each other. Claire started spending more time at the office, claiming it was due to the demands of the new campaign. She wasn't lying, her workload had increased, but she couldn't ignore the fact that she was also drawn to the energy of working with Oliver. His texts, though always professional, carried a warmth that made her smile more than she cared to admit. Nathan, on the other hand, found himself lingering at the office late into the night, often with Emma by his side. Their conversations grew more personal, and while nothing had happened between them, the lines were beginning to blur. Nathan justified it as harmless, just two colleagues blowing off steam, but deep down, he knew better. It wasn't long before their behavior began to raise questions. Claire noticed Nathan's late nights were becoming a pattern, and she couldn't ignore the way he seemed distant even when he was home. He, in turn, picked up on the way. She suddenly seemed more guarded, her phone always within arm's reach, her smile just a little too rehearsed. The turning point came one evening when Claire returned home earlier than expected. She walked into the house, calling out for Nathan, but the only sound was Bailey's tail thumping against the floor. As she made her way through the house, she noticed Nathan's laptop on the dining table, open to an email from Emma. The subject line, "Can't stop thinking about last night," sent a jolt through her chest. Claire closed the laptop, her hands trembling. She didn't confront Nathan that night. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and a sinking feeling she couldn't shake. Nathan, oblivious to what Claire had seen, arrived home late. He kissed her on the cheek, mumbled something about a long day, and disappeared into the shower. Claire watched him go, her heart heavy with suspicion, but her resolve to uncover the truth even stronger. The days following Claire's discovery of Emma's email were heavy with unspoken tension. Claire found herself watching Nathan more closely, analyzing every word, every gesture. She didn't bring up the email, not yet. Instead, she decided to gather more evidence, wanting to be absolutely sure before confronting him. Nathan, oblivious to Claire's suspicions, carried on as usual. Or so it seemed, but even he couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. Their conversations felt hollow, and the warmth that once filled their home had given way to a cold, uneasy silence. One evening, Claire sat on the couch with her laptop, scrolling through her emails. Oliver had sent another late-night message, this one asking about the latest campaign updates. His tone was professional, but there was an underlying familiarity in the way he wrote to her, a charm that made her heart skip a beat. She responded quickly, her fingers flying across the keyboard, and found herself smiling as she hit send. Bailey barked from the kitchen, snapping Claire out of her thoughts. She closed her laptop hastily as Nathan entered the room, his tie loosened and a tired look on his face. "Long day?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Yeah," Nathan replied, sinking into the armchair across from her. "Meetings all day, and you?" "Busy," Claire said, forcing a smile. "Work never seems to end." The conversation fizzled out, leaving them in the kind of silence that had become all too common between them. Claire sipped her wine, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the email. What exactly had happened between Nathan and Emma? Was it just harmless flirting, or was there something more? The following night, Nathan told Claire he had to work late. Again, Claire nodded, feigning understanding, but as soon as he left, she grabbed her phone and opened the GPS app she'd secretly installed on his car. She watched as the blinking dot moved through the city, eventually stopping at a bar downtown. Her chest tightened. She knew she couldn't jump to conclusions, but the sinking feeling in her stomach told her she was about to find something she didn't want to see. She quickly grabbed her coat and car keys, determined to find out the truth. Claire arrived at the bar a half hour later, her heart pounding. She stepped inside, scanning the dimly lit room, and then she saw him. Nathan, sitting at a small table near the back, laughing with Emma. They were leaning in close, their heads almost touching, and the sight made Claire's blood run cold. For a moment, she froze, unsure of what to do. She wanted to storm over and confront them, to demand answers right then and there, but instead, she turned on her heel and walked out, her mind racing. This wasn't how she wanted to handle it, not in public and not without proof. The next day, Claire decided to take matters into her own hands. She started by checking Nathan's phone while he was in the shower. She knew it was an invasion of privacy, but her need for answers outweighed her guilt. She found texts from Emma, casual, friendly, but with just enough flirtation to confirm her worst fears. Her hands trembled as she read through the messages. Emma: "Last night was fun. We should do it again sometime." Nathan: "Agreed. It's nice to have someone to talk to." Claire felt her stomach drop. The messages weren't explicitly damning, but the implications were clear. Nathan was confiding in Emma in a way he hadn't with her in months. That evening, she confronted him. "Who's Emma?" Claire asked casually as they sat down to dinner. Nathan froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "She's a colleague." "Why?" "No reason," Claire said, her tone sharp. "Just curious why you're spending so much time with her lately." Nathan hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "It's not what you think, she's just a friend." "A friend?" Claire's voice rose. "Because it looks like you've been spending more time with her than with me." Nathan sighed, setting his fork down. "Claire, I promise nothing's going on, she's just someone I talk to at work." But Claire wasn't convinced. The cracks in their relationship were widening, and she wasn't sure they could be repaired. As Claire's doubts about Nathan grew, so did her connection with Oliver. Their late-night emails turned into phone calls, and their conversations shifted from work to more personal topics. Oliver had a way of making Claire feel seen, appreciated in a way she hadn't felt in years. One evening, after another fight with Nathan, Claire found herself sitting alone in her car outside Oliver's office. She had no intention of going inside, but then her phone buzzed. "Oliver, you okay? You've seemed distracted lately." Claire stared at the message, her heart pounding. Before she could stop herself, she replied, "Not really. Can we talk?" Oliver responded immediately, "Of course, my office." Claire hesitated, then typed a single word. "Yes." Inside Oliver's office, the air was charged. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Oliver leaned against his desk, watching her with a concerned expression. "You don't have to tell me what's going on if you don't want to," he said gently, "but I'm here if you need to talk." Claire looked up at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's Nathan," she admitted. I think he's cheating on me." Oliver frowned, crossing the room to sit beside her. "Claire, I'm so sorry." His voice was soft, his presence comforting, and before Claire knew it, she was pouring her heart out to him. She told him about the email, the texts, the growing distance between her and Nathan, and Oliver listened, his expression full of empathy. "You deserve better," he said finally, his voice low. "You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and then, without thinking, Claire leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened, years of frustration and longing pouring out in a single moment. When they finally pulled apart, Claire's cheeks flushed with a mix of guilt and exhilaration. "I shouldn't have done that," she whispered. Oliver shook his head. "No regrets," he said softly. "You deserve to be happy." Before we dive deeper into this tangled web of betrayal, let me know your thoughts so far in the comments. Do you think Claire should confront Nathan directly, or is she already too far down the rabbit hole? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, things are about to get even more intense. The following days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Claire. Her kiss with Oliver lingered in her mind, a mixture of excitement and guilt that she couldn't seem to shake. Meanwhile, Nathan's behavior grew more erratic. He was more distant than ever, and when he wasn't at work, he seemed preoccupied, lost in his own world. Claire couldn't tell if it was her imagination, but she felt like the walls of their marriage were crumbling faster than she could patch them up. Nathan wasn't blind to the changes in Claire either. He noticed how she clutched her phone tighter than usual, how her smiles felt forced, how she avoided eye contact when they spoke, but instead of addressing it, he buried himself deeper into his work and his increasingly complicated relationship with Emma. One evening, Claire was sitting at the kitchen counter, her laptop open as she reviewed campaign edits. Nathan walked in, tossing his keys onto the counter with a clatter. "Busy?" he asked, his tone casual. "Always," Claire replied without looking up. Nathan hesitated, then leaned closer, glancing at her screen. His eyes flicked to her phone, sitting unlocked beside her. Before Claire could react, a notification from Oliver popped up on the screen. "Oliver, can't stop thinking about you. Dinner tomorrow?" Nathan's expression darkened. "Who's Oliver?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Claire's heart dropped. She quickly grabbed her phone, locking the screen. "Just a client," she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. "A client who can't stop thinking about you?" Nathan shot back. "Claire, what the hell is going on?" The room felt like it had dropped several degrees. Claire tried to compose herself, but the weight of Nathan's gaze was too much. "It's nothing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just work." But Nathan wasn't convinced. "You think I'm stupid?" he snapped. "I've seen the way you've been acting lately. If there's something you're not telling me, now's the time." Claire didn't respond, and her silence spoke volumes. Nathan slammed his hands on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "This marriage is falling apart, and you don't even care, do you?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Maybe you should ask yourself why, Nathan," she said coldly. "Why I've been distant, why I don't trust you anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Neither of them said another word as Nathan stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Nathan didn't return home that night. Instead, he went to Emma's apartment, seeking solace in the only person who seemed to understand him. Emma welcomed him in without question, pouring him a drink and sitting beside him on the couch. "What happened?" she asked gently. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Claire and it's like we're strangers. I don't even know who she is anymore." Emma placed a hand on his arm, her touch both comforting and charged. "You deserve better, Nathan," she said softly. "You deserve someone who sees you." Nathan met her gaze, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The tension between them had been building for weeks, and now it felt impossible to ignore. Emma leaned in, her lips inches from his, and Nathan didn't pull away. The next morning, Nathan woke up in Emma's bed, a wave of guilt crashing over him. He quickly got dressed and left without saying much, his mind racing as he drove home. He knew he'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be undone, but what he didn't know was that Claire had spent the night with Oliver. It wasn't planned. After Nathan stormed out, Claire had called Oliver, desperate for someone to talk to. One thing led to another, and by morning, she was leaving his apartment, her own guilt weighing heavy on her shoulders. When Nathan walked through the door, the tension between them was palpable. They avoided each other, speaking only when necessary. Both were acutely aware that their marriage was hanging by a thread, but neither was ready to confront the truth. The inevitable confrontation came a week later. Nathan had just returned home from work when he noticed a familiar scent lingering in the air, one that didn't belong to Claire. He followed it to the bedroom and found a men's tie draped over the chair in the corner. It wasn't his. "Claire!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. Claire appeared in the doorway, her expression cautious. "What is it?" Nathan held up the tie, his eyes blazing. "Whose is this?" Claire froze, her mind racing for an explanation. It's nothing," she stammered. Don't lie to me, Claire, Nathan said, his voice dangerously calm. Is it Oliver's? Claire didn't answer, and her silence was all the confirmation Nathan needed. He let out a bitter laugh, tossing the tie onto the floor. So that's it, he said. You're cheating on me. Claire's own anger flared. And what about you? She shot back. You think I don't know about Emma. Don't act like you're innocent, Nathan. The argument escalated quickly, years of frustration and resentment boiling to the surface. They shouted over each other, their voices filled with pain and betrayal. By the time it was over, they were both emotionally drained, and the decision was clear. We can't do this anymore, Claire said quietly, tears streaming down her face. Nathan nodded, his own tears threatening to fall. You're right, this is over. The days following their separation were a blur. Claire moved into a friend's apartment temporarily, while Nathan stayed in the house, now eerily empty without her presence. They both struggled to adjust to their new realities, but the weight of their choices hung heavy over them. Claire focused on her work, throwing herself into the campaign with Oliver. Their relationship continued, but it was strained by the guilt she felt. Meanwhile, Nathan distanced himself from Emma, realizing that their connection had been more about escaping his problems than solving them. The turning point came when Claire received a call from Oliver late one night. We need to talk, he said, his tone serious. When they met the next day, Oliver confessed that he couldn't continue their relationship. I care about you, Claire, he said, but I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. Claire was devastated, but understood she knew she needed to face her own mistakes before she could truly move forward. What do you think of Claire and Nathan's choices? Could their relationship have been saved, or was it doomed from the start? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the final act of this emotional roller coaster. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The fallout from Claire and Nathan's separation was swift and messy. Their lives, once intertwined so seamlessly, were now split into two fractured halves. But as they tried to navigate this new reality, the secrets they had kept buried began to resurface with a vengeance, threatening to unravel everything. Claire had always thought she was good at compartmentalizing her emotions, but now she felt like she was drowning. Her nights with Oliver were behind her, but the guilt she carried wasn't so easy to shake. She poured herself into her work, hoping to bury the pain under deadlines and meetings. But as much as she tried to focus, the cracks in her armor were starting to show. Nathan, on the other hand, was unraveling in a different way. He avoided Emma, ignored her texts and calls, and threw himself into a project that no longer excited him. The house felt hollow without Claire, and the silence was deafening. He couldn't help but replay their last fight in his mind, wondering if there was anything he could have done to prevent their marriage from falling apart. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. It was a rainy Tuesday when Nathan found himself scrolling through an old folder on his laptop, searching for a presentation file he needed for work. As he sifted through the clutter of documents, a video file caught his eye. It was labeled Anniversary Surprise. Curious, Nathan clicked on it. The video began with Claire smiling at the camera, holding a small cake with a single candle. "Happy anniversary, babe," she said, her voice soft and full of love. "I just wanted to remind you how much you mean to me." Nathan felt his chest tighten as he watched the video play out. It was from a time when they were happy, before the late nights, the suspicions, and the betrayals. But then, just as the video ended, another file automatically started playing. This one wasn't familiar. The screen showed Claire sitting on a bed, one that wasn't theirs. She was laughing, her hair messy, her face flushed. And then Oliver appeared, pulling her into a kiss. Nathan froze. The seconds stretched into eternity as the truth hit him like a freight train. Claire hadn't just drifted away. She had betrayed him, just as he feared. The pain was immediate and visceral. But what made it worse was that she had hidden it so well. Nathan didn't wait. He grabbed his keys and drove straight to Claire's office. The rain pounded against his windshield, mirroring the storm brewing inside him. By the time he arrived, his hands were shaking, but his determination was solid. Claire was in a meeting when he burst through the door, his presence like a thunderclap. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. "Nathan?" Claire said, her voice laced with confusion and a hint of fear. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Claire nodded and excused herself, leading him into an empty conference room. As soon as the door closed, Nathan turned to her, his eyes blazing. "How long?" he demanded. "What?" Claire asked, genuinely thrown off. "How long have you been seeing Oliver?" Nathan's voice cracked with anger and hurt. Claire's face paled. "Nathan, Don't lie to me," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I saw the video, Claire. I know everything." For a moment, Claire was too stunned to respond. Then the tears came, spilling down her cheeks as she crumbled under the weight of her guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far." Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "You never meant for it to go this far, Claire. You destroyed us. You destroyed me." Claire reached out, but Nathan stepped back, shaking his head. "Don't," he said. "You don't get to apologize and pretend like that fixes anything." The words were like daggers. Cutting deep into both of them, Nathan left without another word, leaving Claire standing alone in the conference room, her sobs echoing off the walls. After confronting Claire, Nathan found himself at a bar, drowning his sorrows in whiskey. He was halfway through his second glass when Emma walked in, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Nathan," she said, sliding into the seat next to him, "I've been worried about you." He didn't respond. His gaze fixed on the amber liquid in his glass, Emma placed a hand on his arm. "Talk to me," she said gently. Nathan finally looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, he let his guard down. "She cheated on me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma's eyes widened. "Claire?" He nodded, his throat tightening. "With her boss, I saw a video." Emma's expression shifted from shock to anger. "She doesn't deserve you," she said firmly. "You deserve someone who loves you, Nathan. Someone who would never hurt you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication, and before Nathan could stop himself, he leaned in, closing the distance between them. Their kiss was desperate, a collision of pain and longing. But as soon as it was over, Nathan pulled back, guilt flooding his system. "I can't," he said, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Emma." Emma looked hurt, but nodded. "I understand," she said softly, "but I'm here if you need me." While Nathan was wrestling with his demons, Claire was having a breakdown of her own. She sat in her empty apartment, replaying their argument in her mind. For the first time, she truly saw the damage she had done, not just to Nathan, but to herself. She had let her insecurities and her need for validation lead her down a path of destruction, and now she was paying the price. In a moment of clarity, Claire picked up her phone and called Oliver. He answered on the second ring. "Claire," he said, his voice hesitant. "Is everything okay?" "No," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore, Oliver. Whatever this is, it's over." Oliver was silent for a moment. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," Claire said, her tone firm. "I need to fix my life, and I can't do that with you in it." A week later, Nathan and Claire met at a coffee shop to discuss the next steps. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also a sense of resignation. "I want a divorce," Nathan said, his voice steady. Claire nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand." For the first time in months, they spoke openly and honestly, laying everything on the table. They both acknowledged their mistakes, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. It was painful, but it was also cathartic. As they parted ways, there was a sense of closure. The chapter of their lives that had been defined by love, betrayal, and heartbreak was finally coming to an end. The tension is at its peak, and the fallout is finally unraveling. What do you think about Claire and Nathan's decisions? Could they have salvaged their relationship, or was the damage too great? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The final step of this story is coming up, and trust me, you don't want to miss how it all ends. The decision to divorce should have been the final chapter of Claire and Nathan's story, but in reality, it was only the beginning of the end. As they navigated the logistical nightmare of dividing their lives, the emotional fallout continued to wreak havoc on both of them, and just when they thought the worst was behind them, a series of unexpected revelations brought everything crashing down again. Claire was sorting through old paperwork in her temporary apartment when she came across a manila envelope buried in a box of Nathan's belongings. The envelope was unmarked, and curiosity got the better of her. She opened it to find a stack of printed emails, photos, and financial records, all documenting her affair with Oliver in painstaking detail. Her heart sank as she realized what this meant. Nathan hadn't just stumbled upon evidence of her betrayal, he had been actively investigating her. The depth of his hurt and mistrust was laid bare in every piece of paper, and it was almost too much to bear. Claire clutched the envelope to her chest, her mind racing with questions. Why hadn't Nathan confronted her sooner? And, more importantly, why did it feel like there was something he hadn't told her yet? Meanwhile, Nathan was sitting in his car outside a law office, staring at a text from Emma. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks, but her message was impossible to ignore. "I think you should know something about Oliver. Call me when you're ready." Nathan hesitated before dialing. When Emma picked up, her voice was laced with urgency. "I didn't know how to tell you this," she began, "but I found out some things about Oliver. He's not who he says he is." "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Emma explained that Oliver had been involved in a series of workplace scandals at his previous jobs, including allegations of financial misconduct and inappropriate relationships with subordinates. The pattern was clear. Oliver had a history of manipulating people for his own gain. Nathan felt a surge of anger and vindication. It wasn't just about Claire's betrayal anymore. Oliver had preyed on her vulnerabilities and exploited them. Nathan knew he had to confront both of them, but he needed to wait for the right moment. The next major turning point came at a mutual friend's party, a gathering neither Claire nor Nathan could avoid, despite their separation. The air was thick with tension from the moment they arrived, but it wasn't until Oliver showed up that things took a dramatic turn. Nathan watched from across the room as Claire and Oliver spoke in hushed tones. He could see the guilt written all over her face, and it only fueled his resolve. With a deep breath, he approached them, his jaw clenched. "Oliver," Nathan said, his voice icy, "we need to talk." Claire froze, her eyes darting between the two men. Oliver, ever the smooth talker, extended a hand. "Nathan, Save it," Nathan interrupted, his tone sharp. "I know all about you, the lies, the scandals, the people you've hurt. Did you really think you could get away with it?" The room went silent as onlookers turned their attention to the confrontation. Oliver's confident facade faltered, and Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. "Nathan, please," Claire whispered, but he ignored her. "You didn't just ruin my marriage," Nathan continued, his voice rising. "You preyed on Claire when she was vulnerable. You manipulated her, just like you've done to so many others. Well, not this time. This ends now." Before Oliver could respond, Nathan turned to Claire. "And you," he said, his voice cracking. "I trusted you. I gave you everything, and you threw it all away for someone like him." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She knew Nathan was right. The party ended in chaos, with Oliver leaving in disgrace and Claire retreating to the bathroom to compose herself. Nathan, meanwhile, drove home, his emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and an unexpected sense of closure. For the first time in months, he felt like he had taken control of the narrative, even if it came at a cost. Claire spent the next few days in a daze, replaying Nathan's words in her mind. She realized that she had been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't fully acknowledged the damage she had done to Nathan. And to herself, she decided it was time to take accountability, not just for her mistakes, but for her healing. Nathan and Claire met one last time to finalize their divorce papers. The atmosphere was heavy, but there was a newfound sense of mutual respect between them. They had both been through hell, but they had also learned a lot about themselves and about each other. "I'm sorry for everything," Claire said as she signed the final document. "Not just for the affair, but for the way I hurt you. You didn't deserve that." Nathan nodded, his expression softening. I'm sorry too, he said, for not seeing what you needed, for not being there when it mattered. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a moment of closure that neither of them had expected. What did you think of Nathan and Claire's confrontation with Oliver? Was it satisfying to see him exposed, or do you think the fallout could have been handled differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We're heading into the final chapter of this emotional roller coaster, and you won't want to miss how it all ends. The aftermath of Nathan's confrontation with Oliver left ripples that extended far beyond the party. Claire and Nathan, though now officially separated, found themselves inexplicably drawn back into each other's lives as unresolved feelings and unanswered questions lingered between them. Meanwhile, Oliver's carefully curated facade continued to unravel, leading to revelations that no one could have anticipated. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about uncovering the truths that had been hiding in plain sight all along. After the party, Oliver's reputation took a massive hit. Whispers about his past behavior began to circulate more openly, and Claire, though hesitant, felt a responsibility to contribute to the growing pile of evidence against him. She provided details of her own experience to one of Oliver's former colleagues, who was compiling testimonies from others he had wronged. Oliver's world quickly began to collapse. The tech startup he had worked so hard to build severed ties with him, and his name became synonymous with scandal. But what made it worse for Oliver was the realization that Claire, someone he had genuinely begun to care for, had been instrumental in his undoing. In a desperate attempt to salvage his life, Oliver reached out to Claire. "You owe me a chance to explain," he said during an impromptu call. "No, Oliver," Claire replied, her voice steady. "I don't owe you anything. You took advantage of me when I was vulnerable, and I won't let you manipulate me again." With that, Claire ended the call, closing the door on Oliver for good. While Claire was dealing with Oliver, Nathan found himself grappling with his own demons. Despite everything that had happened, he couldn't stop thinking about Claire, not just the pain she had caused him, but also the good times they had shared. He couldn't help but wonder if their story was truly over. One rainy evening, Nathan decided to take a leap of faith. He drove to Claire's apartment, rehearsing what he would say in his mind. When she opened the door, her surprise was evident. "Nathan?" she asked, her brows furrowing. "What are you doing here?" I needed to talk," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "Can I come in?" Claire hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. They sat across from each other in the small living room, the tension palpable. "I've been thinking about us," Nathan began, his voice uncertain. "About everything that happened." Claire looked down at her hands, her expression unreadable. And I realized that as much as I blamed you for what happened, I wasn't completely innocent either," Nathan admitted. "I shut you out when you needed me. I let our marriage fall apart without fighting for it." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Nathan continued, his voice growing stronger. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had, but I needed to tell you that I'm sorry for my part in all of this." Claire wiped her eyes, a small, bittersweet smile forming on her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." As they talked, Nathan and Claire began to unpack the years of hurt, misunderstanding, and miscommunication that had led them to this point. They spoke openly and honestly for the first time in what felt like forever, and it was both cathartic and heartbreaking. "I think we both lost ourselves somewhere along the way," Claire said, her voice trembling. "I was so caught up in trying to be everything for everyone that I forgot how to just be me and you. You always seemed so distant, like you didn't need me anymore." Nathan nodded, his expression pained. "I did need you, Claire. I just didn't know how to show it, and when I started to feel like I was losing you, I didn't know how to handle it." The conversation stretched late into the night, and by the time they parted ways, there was a sense of closure. Not a resolution, but a tentative step toward healing. A week later, Nathan received an email from Oliver. The subject line read, "A proposal against his better judgment." Nathan opened it. The message was brief but pointed. "I know you want to move on, but don't you think Claire deserves the whole truth? Meet me at the Mayfair Hotel tomorrow at 8 p.m. if you want answers. Nathan's first instinct was to delete the email, but something about it gnawed at him. What whole truth was Oliver referring to? Could there be more to the story than he realized? The next evening, Nathan arrived at the Mayfair Hotel, his nerves on edge. He found Oliver waiting in the lobby, looking haggard, but still holding on to a shred of his old bravado. "What do you want?" Nathan asked curtly. Oliver gestured for him to sit. "I know you hate me," he began, "and I don't blame you, but there's something you need to know about Claire." Nathan stiffened. "What are you talking about?" Oliver leaned forward, his voice low. "She wasn't the only one who made mistakes. The cracks in your marriage didn't start with her affair. They started long before that, and I think you know that." Nathan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "What's your point?" "My point," Oliver said, his tone smug, "is that if you really want closure, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself what you could have done differently. Because if you keep blaming her for everything, you're never going to move on." Nathan stood abruptly, his anger boiling over. "Don't pretend like you're doing this for me," he spat. "You're just trying to absolve yourself. But you're right about one thing. I need to take responsibility for my part in this, and that starts with never letting someone like you manipulate me again." Nathan left the hotel feeling more resolved than ever. He didn't need Oliver's input to understand what had gone wrong in his marriage. He already knew. But now, he was determined to face it head on. The next day, Nathan called Claire and asked to meet. When they sat down together, he took a deep breath and said, "I want us to try again." Claire looked at him, stunned. "Nathan, I don't know if—" "Just hear me out," he interrupted. "I know we've both made mistakes, and I know we can't go back to the way things were, but I still care about you, Claire, and I think we owe it to ourselves to see if there's anything left worth saving." Claire's eyes filled with tears, and for a long moment, she didn't speak. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's try." As Nathan and Claire tentatively begin to rebuild their relationship, do you think they'll make it, or are some wounds too deep to heal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the emotional conclusion of this journey. The final step is coming, and trust me, it's going to be unforgettable. As Nathan and Claire decided to give their relationship one final chance, they both knew the stakes couldn't be higher. Their decision to rebuild wasn't just about rekindling love. It was about confronting the demons that had driven them apart. Trust, once shattered, is not easily restored, and both of them faced an uphill battle to prove to themselves and to each other that they were capable of change. But life, as it often does, had more challenges in store. Nathan and Claire began their reconciliation with small, tentative steps. They met for coffee on neutral ground, reminiscing about lighter moments in their marriage. It felt awkward at first, like meeting a stranger after years apart, but slowly the walls between them started to come down. One evening, Nathan invited Claire to dinner at his house, the house that had once been their shared home. As Claire walked through the door, memories of their life together came rushing back. The faint smell of Nathan's cologne, mixed with the scent of freshly cooked pasta, filled the air, and she couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for the life they had lost. "Everything looks the same," she said softly, running her fingers along the edge of the dining table. Nathan smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I didn't have the heart to change it." They sat down to eat, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they laughed together. It was a small victory, but it was enough to give them both hope. Despite their progress, the shadow of their past mistakes loomed large. Claire found herself constantly second-guessing Nathan's motives, wondering if he still harbored resentment. Nathan, in turn, struggled to let go of the images of Claire and Oliver that haunted him. Their fragile peace was tested when Nathan received a text from Emma. Though he had cut ties with her after the divorce, she had reached out with a simple message. "I need to talk to you." Nathan hesitated but decided to ignore it. He had made a promise to Claire, and he wasn't about to break it. However, Emma wasn't one to be ignored. A few days later, She showed up at his office unannounced. "We need to talk," she said, her tone urgent. Nathan sighed, gesturing for her to sit. "What is it, Emma?" "I know you're trying to make things work with Claire," she began, "but there's something you need to know." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Emma, I've moved on whatever you're about to say. It's about Oliver," Emma interrupted, her voice sharp. "He's not done with Claire." Emma revealed that Oliver had been quietly reaching out to Claire's coworkers, spreading rumors about her involvement in his downfall. He blamed her for the collapse of his career and seemed determined to make her pay. Nathan's anger flared. He had thought they were done with Oliver, but now it was clear that the man was still a threat. Without wasting a moment, he called Claire to warn her. When Claire answered, her voice was shaky. "Nathan, I've already heard people at work have been acting strange all week." "Why didn't you tell me?" Nathan asked, frustration seeping into his tone. "Because I didn't want to drag you into it," Claire admitted. "I thought I could handle it on my own." Nathan's voice softened. "You don't have to handle it alone, Claire. We're in this together now." Nathan and Claire decided to confront Oliver directly. They knew they couldn't move forward until they dealt with the specter of his presence in their lives. Together, they arranged a meeting with him at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of the city. When Oliver arrived, his confidence was noticeably diminished. The once charismatic man now carried himself with an air of desperation, his sharp suit hanging loosely on his frame. "Nathan, Claire," he greeted them with forced charm. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" Nathan wasted no time. "We know what you've been doing, Oliver. It stops now." Oliver's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Claire said, her voice firm. "You've been sabotaging me at work, spreading lies. It's pathetic." Oliver leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And what are you going to do about it? You can't prove anything." Nathan leaned forward, his gaze icy. "Maybe not, but if you think we're going to let you keep this up, you're sorely mistaken. You've already lost your career. Keep pushing, and you'll lose whatever shred of dignity you have left." For a moment, Oliver seemed to consider his options. Then, with a bitter laugh, he stood up. "Fine, you win, but don't think this means you've beaten me. You're both just as broken as I am." With that, he walked away, leaving Nathan and Claire to pick up the pieces. The confrontation with Oliver marked a turning point for Nathan and Claire. They had faced their biggest fear, him, and come out stronger on the other side. But the journey wasn't over yet. One night, as they sat on the back porch of Nathan's house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Claire turned to him. "Do you think we can ever really fix this?" she asked. Nathan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think it's worth trying." Claire nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Me too." In that moment, they both realized that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. It would be filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, they felt like they were on the same team. What do you think of Nathan and Claire's decision to confront Oliver together? Do you believe their relationship can survive after everything they've been through? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The final resolution is coming, and it's going to be worth the wait. The confrontation with Oliver had cleared a significant hurdle for Nathan and Claire, but their journey toward healing was far from over. The events that followed would test them in ways they hadn't anticipated, forcing them to confront not only their past mistakes, but the vulnerabilities they still carried. As tensions rose and stakes heightened, both Nathan and Claire were thrust into the most defining moments of their story. Just when things seemed to settle, Claire received an anonymous email late one evening. The subject line was cryptic. "You deserve to know." Hesitant but curious, she clicked on it. Attached was a series of screenshots showing private messages between Oliver and another employee from her office. The messages revealed a calculated effort by Oliver to frame Claire for financial misconduct, claiming she had misused company funds during their campaign. Her heart sank as she read through the messages, each one feeling like another stab in the back. Without wasting a moment, she forwarded the email to Nathan with a simple message. "We need to talk." Nathan arrived at Claire's apartment within the hour, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. Claire showed him the email, her hands trembling as she passed her laptop to him. "This can't be real," Nathan said, scrolling through the messages. "How far is this guy willing to go?" Claire shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know, but if this gets out, it could ruin me. I'll lose my job, my reputation, everything." Nathan reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We won't let that happen. We'll fight this together." For the first time, Claire saw the strength and resolve in Nathan that had once been the foundation of their relationship. It reminded her why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. The next day, Nathan and Claire met with a lawyer to strategize their response. They decided to compile all the evidence they had against Oliver, including his past behavior and the messages from the anonymous email. Their lawyer advised them to act quickly, as time was not on their side. Meanwhile, Claire faced the difficult task of addressing the rumors at her workplace. She called an emergency meeting with her team, laying everything out on the table. Though it was a risk, her honesty and transparency earned her the support of her colleagues, who began rallying around her to counter Oliver's lies. As the pressure mounted, Nathan and Claire leaned on each other more than ever. Their shared determination to take down Oliver rekindled a sense of partnership they hadn't felt in years. The turning point came during a company-wide meeting where Oliver planned to present his case against Claire. Nathan, armed with the evidence they had gathered, arrived at the meeting unannounced. He stood in the back of the room, his presence unnoticed until Oliver began his presentation. As Oliver laid out his accusations, Nathan stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room. "Enough." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Nathan. He held up a folder containing the damning screenshots and other evidence. "Before you continue, I think everyone here deserves to see the truth." Oliver's confident demeanor faltered as Nathan handed the folder to the company's HR director. The director quickly scanned the contents, her expression growing darker with each passing moment. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice sharp. "Oliver, we'll need to have a private discussion immediately." Oliver stammered, trying to defend himself, but the weight of the evidence was undeniable. As he was escorted out of the room, Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in months, she could see a path forward. Later that evening, Nathan and Claire sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline. The adrenaline of the day's events had worn off, leaving them both emotionally drained. "I can't believe it's finally over," Claire said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Nathan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's over for him, but what about us?" Claire turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "What do you mean?" Nathan took a deep breath, his emotions bubbling to the surface. "I mean, we've been through so much, Claire, and I want to believe we can make this work, but I don't know if we're strong enough." Claire reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't either," she admitted, "but I do know that I want to try." For a long moment they sat in silence, their hands intertwined. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a step in the right direction. The weeks that followed were a time of rebuilding for Nathan and Claire. They began attending couples therapy, confronting the deep-seated issues that had plagued their marriage for years. It wasn't easy. There were tears, arguments, and moments of doubt, but they were committed to the process. Nathan also made a point to address his own shortcomings. He reconnected with friends and family he had distanced himself from during the darkest moments of his life, finding solace in their support. Claire, meanwhile, began exploring new hobbies and passions, rediscovering the parts of herself she had lost along the way. Together, they started creating new memories, ones that weren't overshadowed by the pain of the past. They took long walks, cooked meals together, and even planned a weekend getaway to the mountains, a chance to reconnect away from the chaos of their everyday lives. What do you think about Nathan and Claire's journey so far? Do you believe they're truly ready for a fresh start, or are there more challenges waiting for them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The final chapter is just around the corner, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends. The confrontation with Oliver marked a critical turning point, but the tension in Nathan and Claire's lives was far from resolved. Their decision to rebuild their relationship had been fueled by a mix of determination and lingering love, but the cracks in their foundation still posed a threat. As they approached the climax of their journey, both Nathan and Claire faced the ultimate test of their resilience and commitment. The weeks following Oliver's downfall were a whirlwind. Claire's reputation at work had been restored, and her colleagues rallied around her in solidarity. She threw herself into her projects, determined to prove to herself and others that she was more than the mistakes she had made. Nathan, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding the trust that had been broken. But the weight of their shared past continued to linger. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner, Claire looked at Nathan and asked, "Do you ever feel like we're just pretending, like we're holding on to something that's already gone?" Nathan set down his fork, his brow furrowing. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think pretending is better than giving up, don't you?" Claire nodded, though her expression remained troubled. The truth was, she wasn't sure if they were holding on to hope or simply delaying the inevitable. The fragile peace between Nathan and Claire was shattered when Emma resurfaced with one final revelation. She showed up at Nathan's office, her expression unreadable as she handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Nathan asked, his tone wary. "Proof," Emma replied. "Proof that Oliver wasn't acting alone. Someone from your past was helping him." Nathan's stomach churned as he opened the envelope. Inside were copies of emails and text messages between Oliver and someone who had been close to Nathan and Claire, a mutual friend named Alyssa. The messages revealed that Alyssa had fed Oliver information about Claire, including personal details that he had used to manipulate her. Nathan's hands trembled as he read the messages. Alyssa had been a close friend of theirs, someone they had trusted implicitly. To discover that she had betrayed them was like a punch to the gut. Nathan and Claire confronted Alyssa the next day. They invited her to their house under the guise of wanting to reconnect, but as soon as she arrived, the atmosphere turned icy. "Alyssa," Nathan began, his voice calm but firm, "we know what you did." Alyssa's eyes widened, but she quickly masked her surprise with a nervous laugh. "What are you talking about?" Claire held up the envelope Emma had given Nathan. "These," she said, her voice trembling, "emails, texts, proof that you helped Oliver sabotage me." Alyssa's face turned pale. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she stammered. "Oliver, he told me things. He said you were lying to Nathan, that you were planning to leave him. I thought I was protecting him." "Protecting me?" Nathan's voice rose, his anger finally boiling over. "By betraying us? By helping the man who tried to destroy Claire's life?" Alyssa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know who else to believe." Claire shook her head, her expression one of disbelief. "You didn't even ask us, you just assumed the worst." The confrontation ended with Alyssa leaving in tears, but the damage had been done. Nathan and Claire were left to grapple with the betrayal of someone they had considered family. The revelation about Alyssa pushed Nathan and Claire to their breaking point. The trust they had been painstakingly rebuilding seemed more fragile than ever, and both of them began to question whether their relationship was worth saving. One night, after yet another argument, Nathan packed a bag and left. He didn't say where he was going, and Claire didn't ask. The silence between them spoke volumes. Claire spent the following days reflecting on their relationship. She thought about the good times, the love they had shared, but also the pain they had caused each other. She realized that if they were going to move forward, they needed to let go of the past once and for all. Nathan, meanwhile, found himself at his sister Maggie's house. Maggie had always been his rock, and as they sat on her porch drinking beers, he finally opened up about everything. "I don't know if we can fix this," Nathan admitted. "Maybe it's too late." Maggie placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's only too late if you stop trying, but you have to ask yourself, is this the life you want? Is Claire the person you want to fight for?" Nathan returned home a few days later, determined to have an honest conversation with Claire. When he walked through the door, he found her sitting on the couch, a packed bag at her feet. "I was about to leave," she said softly. Nathan nodded, his heart sinking. "I don't blame you." Claire looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Nathan, I always have. But I don't know if love is enough anymore." Nathan sat down beside her, his voice trembling as he spoke. I don't know either, but I do know that I don't want to lose you. Not again. For the next hour, they talked. Really talked. They laid everything out on the table, from their fears and insecurities to their hopes for the future. It was raw, emotional, and messy, but it was also exactly what they needed. By the time they finished, they were both in tears, but for the first time in months, they felt a glimmer of hope. Do you think Nathan and Claire's raw honesty is enough to save their relationship, or have they reached the point of no return? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel as we head into the final chapter of this emotional journey. The resolution is just around the corner, and you won't want to miss it. Nathan and Claire's journey had been a whirlwind of love, betrayal, anger, and hope. Their decision to fight for their relationship wasn't a fairy tale resolution. It was a commitment to try, to face the hard truths, and to rebuild from the rubble of their past. But the road to closure was never easy, and the final stretch of their story would challenge them to the core. After their heart-to-heart conversation, Nathan and Claire decided to take things one step at a time. They agreed to go to couples therapy together, a move they had resisted for far too long. Therapy forced them to confront the patterns that had plagued their relationship, from their inability to communicate openly to their tendency to blame each other instead of working together. Their therapist, a calm but firm woman named Dr. Grace, didn't let them avoid the tough questions. "Why do you think you both let it get this far?" she asked during one session. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "I think I stopped believing that Claire needed me," he said honestly. "And instead of talking about it, I shut down." Claire nodded, her voice trembling as she replied, "And I felt so distant from Nathan that I looked for validation elsewhere. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us." These sessions were painful, but they were also transformative. Slowly, Nathan and Claire began to understand each other in ways they hadn't before. They learned to express their needs, to listen without judgment, and to rebuild the trust they had lost. Though Oliver's role in their story had faded, his presence still lingered like a shadow. Nathan and Claire decided to take one final step to close that chapter of their lives. They filed a formal report with Claire's company, detailing Oliver's actions and the harm he had caused. The company responded swiftly, ensuring that Oliver would never be able to work in their industry again. For Nathan and Claire, this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. By standing up to Oliver, they reclaimed their power and sent a message that they were no longer willing to be victims of his manipulation. With Oliver out of their lives and therapy giving them new tools to navigate their relationship, Nathan and Claire began to imagine a future together. They sold the house that had become a symbol of their pain, choosing instead to move into a smaller, cozier apartment that felt like a clean slate. One weekend, as they unpacked boxes in their new place, Claire found an old photo album. She flipped through the pages, smiling at the memories of happier times. "Do you think we can get back to this?" she asked, holding up a picture of them on their honeymoon, laughing on a beach. Nathan looked at the photo, his expression softening. "I don't know if we'll ever be those people again," he said. "But maybe we can be something better. Stronger." Claire smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I'd like that." Months passed, and Nathan and Claire continued to grow. Both as individuals and as a couple, Claire pursued a new project at work that reignited her passion for her career, while Nathan took up woodworking as a way to channel his energy and focus on something tangible. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. They still had disagreements, moments of doubt, and the occasional setback, but they faced these challenges together, armed with the lessons they had learned and a renewed sense of commitment. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, Nathan turned to Claire and said, "Thank you for not giving up on us." Claire took his hand, her smile warm and genuine. "Thank you for fighting for me." The climax of their story wasn't a grand, dramatic moment. It was the quiet realization that they had made it through the storm together. Nathan and Claire's journey had been messy and painful, but it had also been a testament to the power of resilience and love. In the final scene, we see Nathan and Claire hosting a small dinner party in their new apartment. Friends and family fill the space with laughter and warmth, a stark contrast to the tension and isolation that had defined their lives before. As Nathan and Claire exchanged a glance across the room, it was clear that they had found their way back to each other, not as the same people they had once been, but as stronger, wiser versions of themselves. Nathan and Claire's story reminds us that relationships are complicated and messy, but they're also worth fighting for. If both people are willing to do the work, it's not about perfection. It's about growth, forgiveness, and choosing each other every single day. What did you think of Nathan and Claire's journey? Do you believe in second chances, or do you think some relationships are better left in the past? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more incredible recaps with you. See you next time.